Lauder.
Thank you, Mr Assistant Speaker. I just rise to speak briefly on, well, I hesitate to say one of my favourite topics because I'd prefer not to speak about it, but a topic I've raised many times in the past, and that was that during estimates I did ask for an update on the odours that occasionally occur in some Tuggeranong suburbs, ostensibly, to the best of our knowledge, from the Mugga Lane Resource Centre. It's been an ongoing issue for a number of years, been raised by many of my constituents. In response to the questions that I asked during estimates, I was advised there'd been approximately 100 complaints over the last 18 months. And the Directorate did assure me, and I agree that's the case, absolutely. They're working very hard with No Waste ACT and with Remondis, the operator of the Resource Centre, and other interested parties and relevant parties. I understand from the responses I've received that the environmental authorisation has been updated, including, for example, addressing the depth of the soil over the top of the tip face, and some updating of the operations on a day-to-day basis in terms of closing off the tip face at the end of each day. I was told that the operator is also doing work to control leachate that comes out of the old waste areas in the design and construction of new cells which are being developed at the moment for future waste and the treatment of leachate. So I was assured during estimates that these measures have contributed to reducing the odours that may have been coming from the tip. But we still haven't had a sort of definitive response as to whether it is the tip that's the source of the odours or the only source of odours in that particular valley area. So there's no particular recommendations, of course, in regard to addressing the odours. The issue, of course, is for my constituents. It's not okay to leave ratepayers, taxpayers, residents, constituents, however you want to think of them, subject to these terrible odours. Many of my constituents express concerns about, the value of their property, being able to enjoy the amenity of their property, especially during the summer time. Obviously, or it appears during winter time that the odours are not as apparent and there aren't as many complaints. There are still intermittent complaints, and it's not okay just to leave it to say, as we've heard from some members opposite in the past, well, they live near a tip, you've got to expect a smell. They're not actually near a tip, these particular suburbs. They're quite some distance away. And when I drive past the tip, I do expect a smell if I'm somewhere in the area. But in suburbs, far enough away, meeting all relevant standards, you would not expect to have an odour that means you can't have your windows open, that you can't put your washing on the line, that you can't have a barbecue and have people over because you're embarrassed about the smell in your area. It's not okay, and members in my electorate are very, very unhappy that they worry that it's going to happen again this coming summer. It's not good enough. I appreciate, and my constituents appreciate, the work that's taken place so far. But we haven't had any definitive response that, yes, it was the tip that was causing the smell, and that, yes, every possible thing has taken place to address the smell. It is, I guess, symptomatic of a feeling amongst my constituents of a bit of a neglect, a bit of disdain and disrespect for people in that area, that they're just expected to live with it. In some instances, we're talking about people who've spent a lot of money on their homes, people who pay a lot of money in their rates, and it's gone up, of course, in the most recent budget. For example, in Fadden, has one of the highest increase in unit rates increases in the ACT in the last budget. So, people are saying, what am I getting for this increase in my rates, let alone my rates generally, that I have to put up with these terrible odours on an intermittent basis? I do appreciate, I'll stress, I appreciate the work that's been taken place to date. I understand that, as has been explained to me, odours move in mysterious ways. But it's not okay to leave residents of some Tuggeranong suburbs with this experience of a terrible odour impacting their everyday life, impacting their mental health and adding to some concerns about their physical health because they're unsure of what may also be involved with that smell. So I implore the government to continue to try and address those issues. Access Canberra is the area that we usually deal with. And historically, there's been some issues about the reporting of those complaints. I feel reasonably confident that that has now been addressed. But in the beginning, some constituents said when they rang Access Canberra, as we've been instructed, as I told constituents to do and continue to tell them, sometimes they were told, oh, we don't take those complaints. Or when people ring up and say, I've complained about this in the past, they've been told, oh, we have no record of any previous complaints. This isn't okay either, that it may illustrate a lack of training or understanding on behalf of some of the operators in Access Canberra. I'm reasonably sure this has been addressed. It hasn't been something that's been raised with me more recently, but it certainly was the case in the first instance when the number of complaints was increasing about 12 to 18 months ago. So I guess in summary, thank you to the government for the work that they've done so far, Access Canberra and Minister Fitzharris's directorate in Transport Canberra and City Services. We appreciate that you've been attempting to address this issue, but please don't feel that your work here is done, because there are still people who are very, very adversely affected, and as I've said, they fear that come the warmer months, it's going to ramp up again. Please do not let that happen.
Chief Minister, Treasury and Economic Development Director at Part 1.5. The question is